when I started off on television or in the food media, uh, people would watch food videos for information, right? Recipes for information. You'd watch those food videos for information, and you would just take that information back, cook that food, and you'd say, hey, you know what? I cooked this today. Um, and there were these packets of information floating around. You could, in today's world, you definitely can choose your packet of information and just go for it. I sort of believed in the city I come from, food is not information at all. I come from the city of Lucknow, where food is not information. In fact, calling it a recipe or calling it at the face value, calling it out at the face value is actually insulting food. You cannot have food without stories. You cannot have food without a deeper connect. You cannot cook food without a deeper connect. And so I was, initially I felt like a misfit. I felt like I always wanted to take the long way out in this world of short form content where recipes would like finish in a minute. I was trying to create stories for 16, 17 minutes. And the only thing that I had was belief in the power of storytelling, especially in context to cuisine. And I think that's what came through. And today, if you see the limited success of my YouTube channel, you would realize that we've broken the 3 to 5 minute food video format and stretched it to 17, 18 minutes, and that's fortunately happened across other channels as well. So we take great pride in sort of allowing food to shine for longer. Again, I think the learnings typically were that for all of us, food, once you treat it as an information, there's really not much you can do. But once you treat it as an inspiration, once you treat it as something that you can connect to at a much deeper level, once you treat it as a medium that has the power to touch, move, and inspire, then you realize that because people can't eat your food, the best way would have been for them to eat your food, and the touching, moving, inspiring would have happened. They would have just said, I'm gonna go cook it. Now, how do you create that connect? How do you create that connect to your food? And that happens through storytelling. That happens through getting people to go inwards and find their own connect with what you are cooking. Because when they go out there, the necessary objective might not be that they'd want to cook it. The objective might also be, or the end result might also be, that they'd want to go someplace and eat it, which is just fine. Or they'd want somebody at their home to make it, which is also just fine. The objective is that conversations are bigger, are way, way, way bigger than a few plates of food, right? Conversations last longer than a few plates of food, and especially in our context, in the Indian context, wherein we've all gotten stories that have passed down generation to generation just by word of mouth. We, there's no reason why we should not believe in the power and the perenniality of storytelling in our country. And the funny thing is, most of these food stories have also passed down generation by generation by word of mouth. And once you realize that hey, the food will finish. I consume it, it's over. What's left is conversation, right? I was speaking with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and what was said struck me. In India, we eat everything thrice. We wake up in the morning and we tell ourselves a story. We create an anticipation of what we're going to eat. You wake up in the morning and say, today I want to have that paratha which is cooked that way, just like I had there. You're telling yourself the story, building the anticipation. When you're consuming that food, then you're telling yourself the story that you want to tell. Because you just don't eat, right? You also have to tell a story. You also have to have a conversation around what you ate. So, and then you tell your story again when you meet friends in the evening, saying, you know what, I had this amazing breakfast at this amazing place. And that is how we are. And that is how we are as a culture. We cannot isolate food and storytelling, because food is a story that we tell ourselves every moment. You know, every meal is 3 stories. And that is what I strongly believe in the content space or in the television space. And that's why I believe that in the food space, you know, the unspoken, the unsaid, or as they say, the pauses have more power than the projections. You know, what you're saying is powerful, but the pauses have more power. And that's what we are trying to change. We are trying to create space for those pauses, because that's when it hits you. That's when you go back. That's when you internalize. The basis of storytelling is curiosity, right? We're all curious, curious human beings. Or hum sab, we are looking for stories and gossip to sort of satisfy that curiosity. It is what the stories do to us, you know, that is the beauty of it. Do they touch, move, and inspire us, or is just a fleeting thought that sort of passed by? And for me, I think it's really, really important that we believe that food is an art form. We believe that food is the only art form which you can actually consume, which becomes a part of you. You know, they say Anna Para Brahm, right? We are all made of food. We are all just food. And that is why if you're having a food and a connect with that food, whether it is a story you heard somewhere, whether it is a memory that is stuck with it, or whether it is that moment that got created for you, you're also consuming that moment. And that moment then becomes a part of your subconscious forever. You know, food is the body and food stories are the subconscious, you know, and that's how assimilation happens. That's how our growth happens. And it's not just physical growth. Like I said, it's also the subconscious growth. So while food gives us physical growth, the stories along with food, they just get stacked and give us that subconscious growth as well. And I think that's very important, and that's what we believed in as a team, and that's what a lot of us chefs now believe in. When I was, I'll give you a small example of when I was learning. You know, I used to be extremely frustrated, because learning is a slow process, and especially if you're learning from those old masters, they will treat you the old, slow way, which can often be painful for youngsters. And I used to sort of get angry and upset. And one day Munir Ustad, the gentleman that I learned from, he said, "What happened?" I said, "Yeah, no, nothing." He said, "Okay, I get where you're coming from. Let me tell you a story." And then he told me a story of how a cook came to the Nawab's palace, and he said, I will feed you something after a year, but you have to give me 365 gold coins, 1 gold coin every day. And you have to be right here sitting under this. So there was a dead tree, you know, just a stump, a dead tree in the courtyard. He said, you have to sit under this dead tree at 3 o'clock, exactly at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and have what I will cook for you. And the Nawabs were curious. So he decided to give him a gold coin every day. And after a year, the cook placed a bowl, and he placed that bowl under a tree, the same stump. And then he waited for the Nawab. It was way beyond the time that was agreed. the Nawab came and the cook said, well, don't come here, you're late. And he threw the dal onto the dead tree, the stump of the dead tree. The Nawab got really angry for two reasons. One is you took a year and one gold coin every day only to give me a dal, right? And two, how dare you throw it? And he arrested the cook. The cook was arrested. Time passed by, and after 7 odd months, one of the servants came running to the Nawab saying the dead tree is now blooming. And the Nawab got really curious, and he said, call the cook. And the cook was called, and the cook was asked, saying, what was in that dal that it took a year to make? He said, I put the essence, the extract of 365 gold coins. It had the power of gold and the rejuvenating ability. And you just, you were late for it, and the tree sort of came to life with it. And then my teacher looked at me and he said, well, I don't know what you're being impatient for. If food can bring a dead tree to life, well, you're alive, have patience. You'll bloom too. And that's how I've learned cooking. I can never forget that, and I can never not say that story every time I get a chance to speak about food and storytelling. And again, the moral of the story was left open for you to take forward. But the important part was that the moment got frozen in time along with the food. And as storytellers about food, it's very important for us to freeze that moment and not just the recipe. Remember, cooking is not technique. The technique that's involved in cooking, it's a 150,000-year-old technique, which is basically the application of heat to an ingredient, and the ingredient sort of cooks. That is the only technique to food. Application of heat to an ingredient is called cooking. Accidentally, some meat probably fell on fire, it got cooked, human beings ate it, and they said, well, this is great. So, and that's how cooking happened. And then after that, between the fire and the ingredient, we just kept changing the materials. We just put an earthenware pot, then we put a copper pot, and now we're putting steel pots and everything else. And that's the only thing that has changed. That's the only technique and science behind cooking, the application of heat to an ingredient. Beyond that, cooking is pure and pure art. And art is a function of perception. And like I said, the touch, move, and inspire space does not belong to technique. It does not belong to science. It belongs to art. And that's where storytelling sort of sits right in. It sits right in the center of the belief that food is art, and food is meant to touch, move, and inspire. It is not a functional skill that all of us need to have in order to not be hungry. It's very easy. Light some fire, put something on top, put anything to cook. The fire is going to cook it. Might not be tasty, but it'll be nourishing. So that's where the science ends, right? Beyond that is the beauty of art, the beauty of storytelling. Remember, we started by saying the only art form that you actually consume, the only art form that becomes a part of you, and that is food. And that is why I always say, if you're chasing a recipe, come watch a few of my videos. You'll not get the recipe, but you'll get a hook to the recipe. You'll get a reason to maybe cook that recipe, look for that recipe, have somebody cook it for you. You will find a connection to that recipe from within yourself, which touches, moves, and inspires you. And that is the objective of food. All of us if you remember the Maslow's theory of hierarchy, all of us in our journey of life self-actualize in a lot of spaces, right? Um, Food is one aspect in that Maslow's theory of hierarchy, which actually travels through the entire pyramid. You know, and that I think is the beauty of it. But if you choose to keep your relationship with food right at the bottom of just fulfilling your physiological needs, um, then then you got to find that connect and evolve that relationship. Look for those stories that excite you, and even if you don't look for those stories that excite you, at least make sure you're telling yourself a story every morning as to what you're going to eat about it, and then telling your friends a story about what you ate, how you woke up, and what you felt about it. All of us are storytellers, especially when it comes to food, because all of us have the ability to be touched, moved, and inspired. And when you do that, you automatically touch, move, and inspire others. This is my time. Thank you very much. And like I said, food is not just a recipe. A recipe is just the beginning of how you start connecting to food. All the best.